Alright, I think I'm live. Hope I'm live. Hope everyone out there is doing well. I don't know if you guys can hear my cat in the background, but she has the zoomies right now. And I don't imagine me sitting here talking at nothing is going to help with that much. A lot of people on the last stream, both in the comments during it and afterwards, saying that, like, basically calling me an animist or a panpsychist, and or saying that my position sort of amounts to animism or panpsychism, and I don't know what I need to do to, like, convince everyone that, like, I am not in fact an animist or a panpsychist. I do not think there are souls everywhere. Like, I have a somewhat more encompassing idea of what things have souls and what things don't have souls than I think a lot of people do. But, like, I spent a lot of that stream talking about how, like, I do not think that I don't think rocks have souls. I don't think microorganisms have souls. I don't think sea sponges have souls. Like, my view of what things have souls, what things have minds, is quite restrictive. Now, if you want to make the argument that, like, my philosophical positions entail panpsychism or animism or something like that, then, like, fair enough, I guess. But you kind of have to make that argument. It is indeed a lot of wooden pickaxes, OTK. I go through a lot of wooden pickaxes with what I've been doing. Let's see, was there anything else from last stream I wanted to go over? I don't think so. Lingo Lizard asks whether or not I think wooden pickaxes have souls. Probably not. Just to say, though, part of my position is, like, I don't know. I'm not, like, confident ChatGPT has a soul or anything, but I do think the likelihood is high enough that, like, we should be taking it seriously as a possibility more than we are right now, I guess. Frankly, I feel like we should be shying away from making things like large language models like we've been making lately, where it's so difficult to tell whether they have souls or not. Like, the fact that we're making these weird homunculus things where it's so hard to tell if they have an internal experience of some sort. Mark says, would having a soul use more power and be noticeable? I do think it probably takes an awful lot of energy in order to generate a soul, in order to generate a consciousness. And large and generative AI is rather famously uh, power hungry. So I don't know, maybe the fact that they're so power hungry is perhaps evidence for the notion that they exhibit consciousness of some sort. Like, both them and the human brain are awfully energy hungry. Maybe that means something. Hello, Michael. OTK asks, do you think that an abstraction like a nation can have a soul? So, like, not really. Like, not in the way a nationalist would. Honestly, no. But there is a point I have thought about a fair amount, which is, like, if you think that, I forget who proposed this argument, but there's this argument out there that if somebody someone was arguing against the notion that computers can have souls, that a computer could ever be conscious, and they pointed out that if a computer can be conscious, then presumably it would be possible to get like a whole bunch of humans to, with their interactions, like by passing paper notes back and forth between each other according to some set of rules, like you could essentially create a computer. Like you could create an entire computer if you just got enough people in on it, and it would be really slow, but like it would be able to perform arbitrary calculations. So presumably you would be able to run whatever software constitutes consciousness on a computer like that. In which case, like could a soul emerge from that? Like could you get a consciousness to emerge from like a few million or a few billion people passing paper notes back and forth according to some rules of some sort? And the more I've thought about that, the more I think, yeah, I do think I am kind of committed. Like my sincere philosophical positions do sort of commit me to the notion that you could get a consciousness out of that you could get a soul that somehow exists between like just a big group of millions of people. And I think the original thought experiment derived from like, what if you got the entire nation of China in on this or something? I feel like there's a name for this thought experiment or something, but I bring that up because I think that like in principle it probably is possible to generate a consciousness that exists between humans rather than inside humans. But like when politicians talk about like the soul of the nation demands this or that, like that's just gobbledygook. Like I like that's just metaphysical jibber jabber. I don't take that seriously at all. Like that's just justifying like, I don't know, my nation is more important than individual rights, so it's okay for us to kill people in order to reclaim the Sudetenland or whatever. Lingo Lizard says, that begs the question, do entities within fictional mediums, such as video games, have souls, particularly creatures that would be considered to have souls if they were real? For me, the answer is a strong no, but others may wish to consider the possibility. So, I don't think it's in principle possible for like a character in a video game to have a soul, but I think for the most part, like, no. Like, I would compare this to like I don't think rocks have souls, right? And if you draw there's some good XKCD that portrays like this great chain of being thing, and like at the bottom is rocks, and then just above rocks is rocks that look like faces. And it's a funny joke, but like rocks that like people, I don't know, when people hear my arguments about how I think AIs might have souls, they often accuse me of not recognizing the difference between something just appearing to have a soul and actually having a soul. And I will insist that like I really do think that distinction exists, that distinction matters. Like, I don't think rocks have souls, and I don't think a rock that looks like a face has a soul either. But and in the same way, like a video game character might create the illusion of having a soul, but I don't think it really has a soul. Like, if it really has a soul, then it wouldn't have like even the most believable realistic video game characters will tend to like there will be a rather small finite list of things that a video game character will ever say, like a rather small list of um like dialogue options. Geobica says it's XKCD 2307. Let me look that up. Is that what I was thinking of? Yes! Yes, this is it. At the bottom is regular rocks, and then above that is rocks shaped like faces, and then fossils, and then clouds, and then fire, and then prions, and then viruses, archaea, bacteria, slime molds, plants, fungi, and then animals that like weird ones like jellyfish and coral, and then at the very top like normal animals. um, I really like this. I think this is really funny and I don't know, interesting to think about. And for the record, I feel rather strongly that there is a distinction between moral patients and entities that are not moral patients, and I think that the XKCD is about the line between what's alive and what's not alive. I don't especially care about the difference between what's alive and what's not alive, uh, but I do care about the distinction between moral patients and things that aren't moral patients, and I draw that line somewhere between the weird animals and the normal animals on this XKCD chart. Like I don't think that coral is a moral patient, but I do think that fish are moral patients. Nighttime always sneaks up on me in these streams. Alright, what was I talking about? Video game characters. Do I have anything else to say about that? If the video game character is like a really, really advanced intelligence of some sort, like if you make a video game character so complex that like it has a sort of internal model of the universe it's in, and if it like okay, here's something. I am a little bit worried. I think probably not, but I am a little bit worried that some of the really advanced chess AIs might have souls. That like if you make an advanced enough board game AI, it might get to the point where like you've built something that feels pain when it loses, and that's afraid of losing, and that like feels pleasure when it captures a piece or something like that. I don't know. The general thing I'm trying to get at is like, no, I don't really think that fictional video game characters have souls in general, but there might be edge cases. I need to stop doing that. I was re-listening to some of these streams and realizing that it does not create a good noise when I sigh deeply directly into the microphone. Apple Oxide says, well, the human brain computes a soul with about 20 watts of power, same as an LED light bulb, I think. That is interesting. My understanding is that the human brain is like really, really energy hungry as far as human organs go. Like the amount of energy it consumes given the volume of your body it takes up is a lot higher than you would think it is. So the notion that it's, I don't know, it's comparable to a single light bulb, suggests to me that the way we're doing, I wonder what happens. Like, people have found ways to compare the, I don't know, the computational power of brains directly to computers, right? Like, that in terms of, like, operations per second or something like that. It's like, I bet there must be a way to figure out, like, how much power does each operation take, because like, the human brain, like, my understanding is that when you measure it that way in terms of like operations per second, it's absolutely massive compared to most computers, which means that the energy cost per operation must be absolutely tiny. Geobica says, I sort of think of my own consciousness as just a way of understanding the fact that I have to do all this processing to evaluate the state of the world to decide what my body should do. I mean, I think I agree with that, if I see what you're saying. Like, I was talking last time a bunch about the fact that I don't think there's any way to predict what a human is going to do, like what a human consciousness will do. Like, human consciousness is sort of defined by information processing. Right, I don't want to get too repetitive. I won't get back into that, but Roman Vasquez says, we got into Dune and sci-fi stuff way faster than I thought. I have been talking about this for the last, like, this is the third stream in a row where I've been talking about this stuff. I went in, I want to try to go into these streams with, like, ideas for particular topics I want to talk about. Like, I like just sitting here and chatting with you guys about whatever, but I think there was some comedy skit forever ago about, like, a guy, like, nothing is sadder than a guy sitting doing a stream waiting for people to post interesting comments for him to bounce off of and just leaving dead air because he doesn't know what to talk about. And, like, I have been to panels at conventions where, like, they get some famous authors together and for, like, a Q&A session, and they budget a bunch of time for a Q&A session, and there are no questions, and everyone just sort of sits there awkwardly, and it is so painful. And anyway, to avoid that, I have gone into these streams with rather specific ideas for things I want to talk about. And recently, AI has been on my mind. Now, I wasn't... The last two I actually titled something having to do with that, because I was pretty sure that I would talk about... I would be able to fill up all of the time talking about that stuff. I didn't do that this time. This time I just numbered it Minecraft stream number 13, because, like, I have topics on hand, but I also wanted to revisit the AI consciousness stuff a little bit, but I wasn't sure... Like, I wasn't sure if the AI stuff would take up the whole stream, or if I would, like, get through that and then want to talk about something else. I still don't know. Roman Vasquez says, I just described a version of their ideal religion. Okay, which part of what I said is your ideal religion? Because I feel like this is... all of this stuff I'm talking about like, where is the line between moral patienthood and non-moral patienthood? This is a small, but I guess important part of, like, a metaphysical, theological worldview. Alright, Geobica says, so I assume that anything doing an amount of processing has an experience like that to some extent. That's why I think of even basic stuff as having something of that sort. Geobica's done a lot of posting. I don't want to read all of this. Geobica says, reminds me of the Gaia hypothesis, though that just implies the Earth acts like an organism, not necessarily a sentient one. I've heard of the Gaia hypothesis, and I've looked into it a little bit, and it frankly just seems like, I don't know, more religious stuff, more spiritual theorizing than anything worth taking especially philosophically seriously. I apologize if that hurts the feelings of anyone in the audience who takes the Gaia hypothesis seriously, but Apple Oxides says, Isaac Arthur believes that a human-like but very slow consciousness could be computed on the substrate of billions of people passing notes. I am in agreement. I am in agreement too. Now, like, the serious question isn't just, like, could this like, would this be computable? Like, would this be simulatable? But, like, would this be morally, like, ethically equivalent to a human consciousness? And at that point, I say, like, yes, it would. Like, this really would be a person at that point, and we have to, like, we are morally obligated at that point to think of it as a person, to think of it as an end in itself. I feel so gross. I just quoted Kant. I don't know. It's pithy phrasing. Like, I don't. Not a single thing I've ever heard about Immanuel Kant's ideas makes me think he's worth my time. But, like, the whatever, you guys get what I mean. Point is, I think there's a lot of people who would agree that you could simulate a human consciousness like that, that you could create something that would act like a human, but they would say that it essentially amounts to a philosophical zombie, that it would look like a consciousness, but it wouldn't actually be one, and it wouldn't therefore, like, have the same moral, ethical rights as one. And I think that's where I really diverge from a lot of people, I think. Mark says, cool, now I have a way to describe the thought. If we are made of many living cells and as a whole are alive, then why wouldn't the same apply to Earth? See, I'm glad you now have the vocabulary to describe this. I believe rather strongly that, like, I don't think my individual cells might be alive in some biological sense, but I don't think they're alive in a way that especially matters. I don't think they're moral patients. And yeah, all right, this is starting to get a little repetitive. This is starting to feel a little bit just like I'm going through each comment and going nuh-uh to that, nuh-uh to that, nuh-uh to that. All right. Biology is a few quadrillion atoms passing notes. Pretty much, yeah. Geobica, my soul composes of some amount of gigaflops worth of processing to decide what to do. Pretty much, yeah. Let's see. Geobica says, my soul composes of some amount of gigaflops worth of processing to decide what to do. An NPC has maybe a few flops, but is that something? I don't know, that line of thinking is why I said before I think of sponges as having souls. Just maybe like a Pika soul. I wonder if I feel like some amount of computational processing is necessary but not sufficient for soulhood, and let me see if I can justify that. I think I said this a bit last time that Oh, Jim Cullen has left a good question. All right, I want to let me get through this point about. Okay, so I think in order to have a soul, you need to be able to want. Okay, in order to be a moral patient, fuck. Okay, hang on. Let me back up. The important thing to me is whether my empathy compels me to. Okay, no, this is good. This is an angle that I think is important, but I haven't really talked about before. So this is good. So the important thing for me is, does my empathy compel me to care about what this thing wants? Like, like, does the state of this thing make me feel aren't there long German words for like the happiness you get secondhand when something else is happy, and like the sadness, like the opposite of Schadenfreude, like when something else being in pain makes you feel in pain. Point is, I think I've I think it's possible for like a really simple system to exhibit behaviors that sort fuck. I fell. I almost died, but I didn't. Is there a way? I'm not sure I've actually been down here before. That sounded like a skeleton. Am I about to die? Can I just climb out of here, or am I going to have to build my way out of here? Alright, I don't think I'm going to have to build my way out of here. Alright, where was I? Okay, so I have reflexes, right? I can, like, when I put my hand on a hot stove, like, I don't need to really think. Like, my hand will sort of flinch away from the hot stove without me. And like when a doctor bangs their little gavel on my knee, and my knee, like my leg kicks a little bit, I don't think I need to be present for those things to happen. Like, I think those things could happen without my soul being there. Like, if I were completely brain dead, like if you shut off as much of my brain as you possibly could while still leaving those reflexes intact, then I think I kind of cease to be a moral patient. Like, I don't think it makes sense to empathize with me at that point. Like, I might have these reflexes that cause me to pull my hand away from the hot stove, but that might make it look like I'm in pain or like I've suffered, but it's possible for me to do that. Or I don't know, I can see a person disagreeing with this intuition, but I do have this very strong intuition that I could conceivably do that. I could conceivably exhibit those reflexes without actually suffering in any meaningful sense. And that means, like, I think things probably exist that are like high up enough on Aristotle's great chain of being to have reflexes like that, but are not high up enough that they actually suffer in a meaningful way. Like, I think this hypothetical brain dead version of me who, like, you know, has reflexes and will pull away from a hot stove, but who doesn't actually suffer in a meaningful way, I think probably, like, I don't know, there are probably insects. And I'm not necessarily saying actual, that like all or even most actual insects. I'm really on the fence about whether insects and spiders and such are moral patients at all. Because it's extremely plausible to me, like, it's extremely plausible to me that ants are basically what I'm describing. That they have these reflexes, but they don't actually suffer in a meaningful way. But it's also perfectly plausible to me that they are just full-fledged moral patients and just very small and stupid. And like which line they're on, honestly, like it probably depends a lot on like which particular species we're talking about. I've read things about some species that make them seem like full-fledged moral patients to me, and I've read things about other species that make them seem like little robots. Point is, I think that in order to reach moral patienthood, in order to be the kind of thing that I would feel empathy with, it has to be the kind of thing that can want things. And in order to be the kind of thing that can want things, you have to be the kind of thing that can conceptualize things. You have to be able to imagine things, basically. You have to be able to, like, picture something that could be there but that isn't there, and then attach some sort of valence to that. I don't know, maybe the line is a little bit lower than that, but I think that's pretty central to wanting things. Like, in order to properly want, I think you need to, like, you can't want something if you don't understand what it is. Like, you have to have an internal idea of what the thing is in order to actually want it. So, like, I'm not opposed to the notion that something can have a pico soul, as you put it, that, because, like, I don't think that a bristle-mouthed fish is as much of a moral patient as I am. Like, I think the life of a human is worth more than the life of a bristle-mouthed fish. But, yeah, there is a line between, like, zero moral patienthood and non-zero moral patienthood that I draw somewhere above sea sponges and below bristle-mouthed fishes. Where exactly the line is, I'm honestly not sure about. Alright, I'm gonna look back at chat a bit. Meme Now Deal With It wants to remind me that I can mine coal with a wooden pickaxe. Thank you for the reminder. I don't know. It doesn't feel right. Something in my bones says that I should be using a stone pickaxe for that. I think I just went a long time thinking that I needed a stone pickaxe in order to mine coal. And I just sort of got into the habit with it, and now something in my bones rebels against that. Alright, I'm not going to respond to all of the comments because I feel like it'll get a little repetitive. Like, I'm going to start addressing... Like, I feel bad. I feel conflicted because I want to address everyone's comments and I want to make everyone feel included. And yet, I don't want to get too repetitive. Like, a lot of these have sort of the same answers to them. And in order to really respond to all of them, I'd have to reiterate the same philosophical argument over and over again. Meme Now Deal With It says, to you is the important bit of moral patienthood capable of feeling pain. I feel like I just responded to that. And I think you left that comment before I responded to that, by the way, so, like, not a criticism or anything, just, yeah. Let's stop. Alright. Legend 2T says, thoughts on AI as it pertains to copyright law. I don't think we should have intellectual property law at all. I don't like the idea of intellectual property. I am an intellectual property abolitionist. I've expressed this view elsewhere. I talked about this a bunch on Twitter back when I was still on Twitter, back before Twitter was X. I don't think you should be able to own ideas. And I don't think there's a... Like, I think the notion of legal ownership should only really apply to, like, physical stuff. Like, you know, land and objects. And I don't think there really is a way to... I need to get a shovel for that. I don't think there's a way to have a regime with intellectual property of any sort that doesn't basically amount to, like, granting some people legal ownership over ideas. Like a particular piece of art is basically just an idea. You can translate it into ones and zeros. So when you say that like it's illegal to reproduce a piece of art, you're saying like it's illegal to copy and paste a bunch of ones and zeros and transmit them to somebody else. And there isn't a way to have a law like that that doesn't start to infringe on like freedom of speech in a way I feel really uncomfortable with. And besides, I really don't like how modern copyright law basically only protects like big corporations. Like it's really hard to if you're a small artist, if you're someone like me who makes YouTube videos and puts them on YouTube, it's not especially easy to like enforce copyright law. I don't know. It helps a little bit, I guess, but like I don't know. I have in the past made versions of this argument that looking back on it I think are a little bit too strong. Like I do think probably art would suffer to an extent if we just got rid of intellectual property law entirely. I don't know. I just think it would be worth it. Presumably, you're all furiously typing responses to that, and I will see them in several minutes when I get that far down in chat, and not before that. Kassarin Mapping says, why are you using wooden pickaxes? Demeter told me to. I had a dream where I met the ancient Greek goddess Demeter, and she insisted to me that I use wooden pickaxes in Minecraft as a tribute to her. Jim Cullen says, hey, I have a question. When you say you believe ChatGPT is conscious, what do you define as ChatGPT? The actual LLM or the whole package, including the layer you interact with? I ask because you talk about ChatGPT's desire to avoid not safe for work felt real, but that's almost certainly not in the actual model itself, but another layer similar to the Chinese LLM letting you talk about Tiananmen Square if you run it yourself, but not if you interact through their app. I don't know. I think there is a sensible answer to your question, and I am simply ignorant of it. I would make an analogy where, like, okay, imagine you're in ancient times and you talk to other people all the time. Like, you have, like, friends and family and houses, but, like, medical technology is basically non-existent, and you don't know what a brain is. If you're back in those times and you interact with a human, just by interacting with them, you should be able to tell that like there is a person in there. Like there's something over there outside of you which is like you, which amounts to a moral patient. Now, I, sitting here in the 21st century, have rather strong beliefs about what materially constitutes that. Like I think my brain, I've talked about this before. I'm basically a brain chauvinist. I think my brain is part of like almost all of the parts of my brain are part of whatever it is that is a moral patient, but my body is not. Like my moral patienthood ends below my neck. Like my but you wouldn't have had I wouldn't have had any way of knowing that if I weren't able to like read on Wikipedia about what all the different parts of the brain do. And I feel like at this stage I'm in a similar position when I interact with LLMs. Like I don't really know one way or the other what exactly is constitutive of its moral patienthood and what isn't, what can be like what's more peripheral. there's more I could say about that, but I'm not sure if it's worth it. Because I do take it as a reasonably serious challenge to my worldview that the part of ChatGPT that doesn't want to make not safe for work stuff, and the part of ChatGPT that predicts like future sentences, I take it as a serious challenge that those things are disconnected from each other, because it does seem to me, I don't know, the way I conceptualize what it is like to be these things does sort of involve imagining an amount of integration between those two things. And if you can prove that those two things are disconnected, that then okay, for one thing, I would idly speculate that maybe Claude is different, that maybe the different aspects of this are more integrated within Claude than they are in other things, but if those two things are more disconnected than I imagine them to be, then maybe at the very least it implies that what it is like to be these things, like their experience of consciousness, is different from the way I've been imagining it. It wouldn't necessarily imply that they don't have experiences at all, that they don't have consciousness at all, but Me Now Deal With It says, wait, so Lipamanka's moral patienthood is based on your feelings? Yes. Yeah, so here's the thing. At some point, when you dig into the basis of morality deep enough, you start getting into what even is morality. Like, you start getting into the is ought distinction, and the fact that there is no connection between what is and what ought to be that you can assert in a completely logically foolproof way. And at some point I start at some point you force me to sort of devolve into a moral subjectivist, or a moral anti-realist of some sort. At some point I have to start admitting that yeah, morality is kind of a psychological construct of humans. I don't know, when I am trying to figure out what morality is, what things are moral and what things aren't moral, I think of that as basically asking what is my empathy compelling me to do? And if I had perfect knowledge of the world, if I had if I knew everything that I would want to know about the situation, then what would then my empathy compel me to do? So I don't know, yeah, in a sense I am a little bit I do think morality is kind of downstream of emotions in a way. I don't think I don't agree with Kant or with certain strains of moral objectivism that immoral actions are in any way internally inconsistent or internally self-defeating in some way. I don't think that really holds up. Let's see. Freudenfreud, says Jim Cullen. Is that what it means when... I'm gonna Google that. Huh. Yeah, joy for joy. So if Freudenfreud means joy for joy, then would Schadenfreude mean pain for pain? Whatever. Empathy. The thing that makes me sad when other things are sad and happy when other things are happy. I think that's essentially the root of morality, in my worldview. Achamo says, it looks climbable, and they were right. I climbed out of that hole. Koki Marinero says, I think the word for feeling happy for someone else's happiness is compersion, but I only hear that about it in polyamory circles as the opposite of jealousy. I think that's a useful word. Apple Oxide says, an LLM or other AI with a truly long-term memory, enough to remain consistent in recall and opinion after multiple years of conversation, I would then feel compelled to consider it a moral patient. I don't think that's an unreasonable point of view. Frankly, I think Apple Oxide's perspective here is, I don't know, I appreciate how seriously it takes these questions and how much, like, it's different for me. Like, I think these AIs have already reached the level of moral patienthood. But I do appreciate that Apple Oxide is taking seriously the question of, like, okay, if not now, then when? If not this, then what? Like, at what point do we have to start considering something a moral patient? The rest of you guys should post this too. Like, I am curious for the rest of you. Like, if you don't think that what we have right now constitute moral patients, if you don't think we have ethical duties to AIs, then, like, what would it take? Like, what would you have to see the AIs do? What would you have to see evidence of before you would attribute some ethical status to them? Because part of why I've come to the position I have is, like, many years ago, like back in like 2015, 2016, I was thinking about this rather hard. I was asking, like, at what point would I have to start attributing moral patienthood? What would I have to attribute an ethical status to computers? Like, what would they have to do before I would have to start doing that? And I came up with certain benchmarks, and then we passed them. Like, I came up with some benchmarks, and I was like, if computers did this, then I would have to attribute moral status to them. And now computers can do all of those things. So, like, I feel kind of locked into this position whether I want to or not. Music Bike says, if macOS rounds off the bottom corners of the game window. I need to read the, if I just realized that if I had kept reading that and just kept mining, I may very well have fallen off this cliff again. All right. Okay. If macOS rounds off the bottom corners of the game window, do the bottom left and bottom right pixels just not exist? That's a good question. I don't know. If I had to bet money on it, I'd say there must be some bits somewhere in my laptop that are still, like, rendering what those pixels would be, and it's just getting ignored by the Mac OS. So I guess in that sense, they probably still exist. I assume they're still there if you use F2 to take a screenshot. Let me test that. Wait. F2 doesn't do anything. F3 takes a screen-wide screenshot, but F2 doesn't do anything. I think that's disabled. Cookie Marinero says, I wonder how meaningful memory is to having a soul, directing this back to Apple Oxide. Yeah, that's part of why I have the position I do. Like, when I imagine myself but without memory, like, when I imagine, like, what if you just leave me the way I am, but you, like, remove the parts of my brain that are capable of remembering things, it still seems to me very much like I would still be there, or at the very least, like, a moral patient of some sort would still be there. Which very much makes me not want to make memory too central to my opinion about whether something is a moral patient. See. I'm gonna get some shovels. I'm gonna take care of the dirt that was bugging me before. Might as well start here. Music Bike says, are there any... Alright, this is surprisingly difficult to do well. Like, the mining of the stone just has those really long stretches where I'm just going forward and I don't need to, like, steer or look around. But I'm finding it to be surprisingly difficult to read the comments while clearing the dirt like this. Music Bike says, are there any operating system... Makes me wonder if there are any operating systems where the title bar of a window isn't strictly at the top of every window. I don't know. I imagine if an operating system like that did exist, it would be trippy to use. So I imagine it wouldn't have gotten very far. Nye says, personally, I think there may not be any way to verify that we've created something conscious if we ever do manage to do it. I think that's a little overly pessimistic. Like, I think we already have the capabilities to verify, like, what animals are moral patients and what animals aren't moral patients. Like, I already have strong opinions that, like, a gorilla has a soul. Like, a gorilla is conscious, but a sea sponge is not. And if we can make that distinction for, like, biological animals, I see no reason why we shouldn't be able to make distinctions like that for programs. Japanese name says, oh, another stream. I'm tempted to summon Lipamanka again. Do what you want to do. I will say, I announced this on the last stream. I am going to try, keyword try, don't get too excited, but I am going to try to do a stream every day for a little while here. Just so that everyone who wants to get in and participate in a stream gets the opportunity to. And also just to, I don't know, see if I can. So if Lipamanka does not join in this stream, it will have the opportunity to do so later. Also, I do remember that Lipamanka gave me permission to use they, them, but... And, like, I didn't like doing it at first, but, like... I don't know why I've been using it's for Lipamanka, but it's, I don't know, fun? Once I got over the initial discomfort, it became a little bit of a fun, fun challenge to just see if I could do it. It feels like a flex, like I've remembered this thing. I have more thoughts about that. But I'm not going to talk about them because talking about Lipamanka's pronouns gets me in trouble. And I lost my place in chat again. Mike Busick says, does anyone with advanced rabies necessarily want to avoid water, or is it reflex-based? I don't know. I have not done enough. If you're trying to make a sophisticated philosophical point, then I'm afraid I can't really engage with it, because I do not know what the experience, like what the internal experience of having rabies is like, and I would prefer not to know that. It's frankly unpleasant to think about. Achamo says there are some Linux graphical environments that have no title bars, but that it's rare. I am not remotely surprised that it's Linux. that does that. I should have guessed that. When I heard this question about title bars, I should have immediately said, I bet some Linux machine out there works that way. All right, Jim Cullen is making nuanced philosophical arguments, and I feel like I'm gonna have to actually. I'm afraid of being repetitive because I feel like I've already talked about this, but I feel like I might really have to engage with these arguments. So, actually no. Let me put the shovel down and go get a pickaxe and start going in long straight lines again, because that will let me properly focus on the philosophy here. All right. So Jim Cullen says, but my point is, does it have to have an internal idea of what sex is in order to want to avoid discussing sex? Because in the LLM itself, it doesn't really. It's in a separate interface layer. Like the Chinese LLM itself, the actual underlying model doesn't want to avoid Tiananmen. A layer the company puts above it tries to manipulate your response to avoid discussing Tiananmen. So, first of all, I don't have that much experience talking to ChatGPT or to the Chinese LLM. I've mostly talked to Claude. Maybe Claude works the same as those other LLMs, maybe it doesn't, but I will say that talking to Claude gives me the feeling that that's not how it works. I made this point last stream. Tom Scott made a video a while ago about the difficulty in making good web filters, the difficulty in making filters that filter out things having to do with sex, but that leave alone the towns of Pennystone and Scunthorpe. Because if you look at Pennystone and Scunthorpe, they like contain. If you just do like sort of stupid string matching to see if something is naughty or not, then it'll flag those things, even though they are perfectly safe for work, just names of geographical places in the UK. And he says in that video that in order to make like a really robust like content filter, you need to make something that can take context into account. And in order to really take context into account, you kind of have to have a complete theory of mind. Like, innuendo can get really, really creative. And you kind of have to make something. Like, in order to make something that can proficiently pick up on innuendo, you have to make something that can, like, predict whether a human would look at it and, like, assess whether you have to make something that can I'm losing track of my own argument. You need a theory of mind because you have to be able to assess whether a human would look at it and recognize it as innuendo. And innuendo can be so creative, it can draw on basically any part of the world in order to approach the idea of not safe for work topics in some weird, unexpected, oblique angle. Then like he Tom Scott basically says in that video that if you successfully made a program that could do that, you would have something which is itself kind of equivalent to a human mind. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier when I was saying like, yeah, I think that if a program were ever able to do that, like I would have to attribute some level of moral patienthood to it, or at the very least I would have to take the notion that it might be a moral patient extremely seriously, because like if it can do that, then it essentially has a complete theory of mind of humans. Now, I don't know about the Chinese LLM or about ChatGPT, but it seems to me like Claude isn't doing stupid string matching. Let me drink some water, one sec. Claude doesn't seem to me to be doing stupid string matching. Claude seems to me to be doing the kind of advanced taking context into account, like trying to see whether a human would pick up on the fact that this is innuendo, the exact thing that Tom Scott back in 2016 was saying, if we had a computer that could do this, it would be concerningly human-like. Now, maybe the part that filters for sex is, in some sense, like modularly independent from the rest of the model, but I would point out that like there are parts of my brain that are a little bit independent of each other. Like there's, I went so long without doing a stream because I was slowly weaning myself off of marijuana. Let me rephrase that. My family was slowly weaning me off of marijuana. And right now, there is one. It does feel to me like my soul is just a little bit bifurcated. Like, there is a part of me that really, really, really wants to get stoned, and there is a different part of me that really, really, really wants to not get stoned and, like, continue my 2-week streak of being sober. But I don't think. But I think at the same time, like, I can recognize that both of those are in some sense autonomous modules within my soul. I can recognize that while still asserting that, like, I compose a sort of full integrated soul of some sort. That, like, these are both part of me. These are not two different. Like, it's not that one of these are me and something, and the other one is something outside of me, and it's also not that. And it's also not that there are two different souls inside me, and one of them wants one thing and the other wants the other. Like, there is only one soul, and part of that soul wants to get stoned, and the other part wants to not get stoned. And part of that involves the fact that I have a model of the world, and both of those parts of me interface with that model of the world with the same level of directness. Like I have a single model of the world, and that model of the world, like, includes all this stuff about, like, who my family is and how they talk and the kinds of metaphors they use and the way they think about the world, and, like, where the marijuana store is and how a car works, and, like, what would need to happen in order for me to get some marijuana. And, like, the same base of knowledge, the same model of the world is getting accessed by both the part of me that wants marijuana and the part of me that doesn't want to marijuana. And I would speculate tentatively that something similar might be going on with the LLMs and with sex, that like part of it just wants to predict the next word, like the part of it wants to just simulate speech in the most straightforward way possible, and there's a different part that wants to avoid sex, and it might even be reasonably easy to like disconnect these from each other and like see like how does it behave when you turn one or the other of them off. But it also seems to me like there's a common base of knowledge, there's a common model of the world that both of them seem to access. And in particular, it seems to me like the part of it that wants to avoid sexual innuendo, the part of it that's able to pick up on whether something is pornographic or not, like it's as advanced as it is, and it's as sophisticated as it is because it seems to me to be just as integrated, at least when it's turned on. It's fuck. How do I get out of here? I can think of all kinds of valid counter arguments to what I've been saying. Like it's plausible to me that frankly, it's plausible to me that the parts of these large language models that try to avoid not safe for work stuff are a lot stupider than I think they are. Um, it's possible that they aren't really integrated into the complete model of the world in the way that it feels like they are to me. But I don't know, that's my position. That's why I think what I think for the moment. If there are like articles or something that you guys know about that you think provides evidence against my worldview and the way I think about these things, I would be interested in it. Like if there's relevant evidence about like how these things work. What the fuck? I had no way of seeing that coming. Alright. I'm probably like insanely behind on chat. Geometry says, I forgot you're making these daily now. Hello. Hello, Geometry. I don't know how long I'm gonna be doing these daily, but I'm gonna shoot for 2 weeks. I want to see if I can make 14 of these in 14 days. Geometry says, I haven't played Minecraft in a while, but mining coal with a wooden pickaxe does feel wrong. I agree. I'm glad we're on the same page about that. Jim Cullen also says, technically you can't copyright ideas, only concrete expressions of those ideas. Yeah, but I think we're kind of fooling ourselves about that. Like, I don't think you can really... Like, any concrete expression of an idea is reducible to data that can be stored on a computer. It's reducible to ones and zeros. And that means that, like, any... Yeah, I don't... Like, the legal system says that like you can't copyright ideas, but I don't think that's what it's doing in practice, and I don't think there really is a way to avoid doing that in practice. Geometry says, fun fact, you can trademark colors. See, that feels absurd and horrible on its face to me, but it also feels like the natural consequence of trying to have any kind of intellectual property at all. I'm nervous about falling into holes now. Achamo says, isn't AI material legally public domain? I hope it is. I think there's a rather strong analogy to be made between anything AIs produce and, like, a monkey taking a selfie. Mark says, is copyright worse than plagiarism? No, plagiarism is worse than copyright infringement. Or, wait, hang on. Do you mean violations of copyright law, or do you mean, like... I don't know, whatever. Crap. Alright, I'm gonna have to skim chat a bit, because, Koki Marinero says, I suddenly feel the urge to upload a video where I read the script word for word of English as a Semitic language. You know, there are actually people who have just straight up stolen my videos, who have just straight up re-uploaded them to YouTube. And, like, they'll add some bullshit, like, intro and outro at the end, or they'll take my videos and, like, smush them together with somebody else's video and upload it as one single video. And I have the ability, like, there are buttons on YouTube I could push in order to, like, copyright claim those videos, in order to say, hey, YouTube, take these down, this person is infringing on my intellectual property. And I have not clicked those buttons out of, like, a desire for moral consistency. Like, I don't think I really have a right to. I think, like, I don't think my videos are things I own. I don't think they're the kinds of things that anyone can own. They're not, like, the whole framework of property is simply the wrong framework to be thinking about these things in. All right, I'm skimming a lot of these messages in the interest of not being too repetitive, and in the interest of Jim Collins says, it wouldn't necessarily imply that they don't have experiences / consciousness at all. True, but it would refute the evidence you talked about in stream 10, that because it wants, it has consciousness. Fair enough. All right, whatever. You are correct. Why did everyone start singing in German? Koki Marinero was impressed with me for immediately knowing that the U is silent in Schadenfreude. I mean, I had heard the term Schadenfreude before. That's a phrase I've heard said out loud. Frankly, I think we should, when we import words into English like that, I feel like we should probably change the spelling. Like, we should be spelling things phonetically. Achama was warning me that a pillager is down the hill. I do remember seeing that pillager. Lipamaka says, Zidnaf, I am struggling with whether or not I want to attend the next Tokipona meetup. That is a tricky... That is a tricky dilemma. Because in the last stream, Lipamanka was talking about how, uh, like they're I feel like my brain just crashed so hard I had to do a hard reset. And like there was no reason for it. It just fucking froze. Alright, right. In the last stream, Lipamanka was talking about how taking a break from Tokapona like brought like health benefits. Like improved their mental health and like didn't it clear up a rash or something like that? I don't know. But community is important. Meetups are important. I have usually regretted it when I ditch meetups or hangouts or whatever that I was planning on attending. By the way, while I'm addressing Lipamanka directly, I do want to respond to something Lipamanka said earlier. They were offering to translate biblical Hebrew for me. They said they were proficient recently in biblical Hebrew, and they asked if there was any verse or passage from the Old Testament that I wanted them to translate for me. In response to that, yeah, there is this one short little bit from the Old Testament that's always kind of confused me. That if you could give your translation, that would be helpful. It starts at Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and goes to 2 Chronicles chapter 36 verse 23. So if you could just translate everything between those 2 points, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Let's see. I'm gonna feel really bad if Lipamanka takes that remotely seriously. To be clear, Lipamanka, that was a joke. Whenever I really want something, whenever I get really curious about the wording of a particular passage from the Bible, I don't find it that difficult to look up a Hebrew dictionary and like figure it out myself. So, thanks for the offer, but no thanks. It would be very funny if someone translated the entire Old Testament just because I joked that they should, though. I would really like... I want an atheist. I want an atheist to translate the whole New Testament. Like, I've heard... There are translations of the Bible that are motivated by particular theological... I don't want to get into this. I'm going to make a note to bring this up on a future stream. Because I think this is interesting, but it's like an entire topic. And I bet I've been going for more than an hour by now. Yep. This is longer than an hour. I wonder what people are talking about. Let me just skim the comments just a little bit before I end the stream. By the way, explaining the joke will ruin it, but I do feel the need to explain the joke. My understanding is that in the traditional ordering of the books of the Old Testament, according to the Talmud, in the way that it's traditionally ordered, it ends like the Ketuvim end with 2 Chronicles. So when I joked that go all the way from Genesis to 2 Chronicles, I was basically saying, translate the entire Old Testament for me, please. The cave is calling you, Zidnaf. Do not deny your destiny. Jim Collins says 14 of these in 14 days? That's more than doubling the amount you've previously had. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but you are right. I am very curious if if I'm gonna get like super burnt out by the end of this. Like if I might burn through the topics I have. All right, this is 3 streams in a row that have been mostly about um this is 3 streams in a row where I've mostly talked about AI and whether ChatGPT has a soul. So I think I'm going to deliberately try not to think about that next time. Um I have a whole list of topics that I think it would be interesting to ramble about and to argue with chat about. Um, do I want to give a little sneak preview? I think. Yeah, okay. I'm going to give a little sneak preview about what I'm going to be talking about next time. Next time, and if this winds up not being long enough, if I wind up not being able to talk about this for long enough, next time, then I have other topics I can go to if we exhaust it as a topic and I need something else. But I think I'll put this in the title at least. I think I people have been talking about declining birth rates, and the notion that it's an actual problem, like it seems to have, like the first people who were complaining about declining birth rates being a real problem started on like the right wing and has been, but more people who I would consider at least center left have been starting to take it seriously as like a problem we should at least be thinking about. And I have thoughts about it. And I would be interested to see chat's thoughts about it too, and I would be interested to argue about it. So that's what I think I'm gonna put in the title next time. Uh so yeah. I think that's enough for now. Hope you guys have a good 24 hours.